Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey folks, today we're going to take a look at a game and its expansion. I rarely do that and put them into the same video, but it felt called for here. That game is called Fleet Commander, and this is Fleet Commander Set 1 Ignition, and then its expansion, which is the Fleet Commander Extension expansion. I think that's just to double make sure that you know what this is, and that's Set 2 Beyond the Gate. And it's kind of weird about these games. They have been available for over a year now, I believe. They came out like Essen 2014 and have been available over in Europe and have not really made any kind of ripple. No one's really heard about them or talked about them. And now they are actually, as we speak, kickstarting. I don't know if it's a new edition of the game, a new version of the game, a sequel, something to that effect called, I think, Fleet Commander Genesis. That looks very, very different than what I have here. But I can't speak about that game. I can only speak about these final versions of the original game. And what the game is, it's a two-player, unless you have multiple sets of the base game, a two-player miniature skirmish game that takes place in space. Each player has a fleet of ships. You have different classes of ships. You have the battleship, which is your biggest ship, then you have the destroyers, and you have the frigates, and you are maneuvering around this 5x5 square board, avoiding obstacles like asteroid fields and gravity wells, and trying to outmaneuver and outflank and destroy your opponents through a dice system where you're allocating dice for resources. That's pretty much the whole game, but let me go ahead and show you how it works by actually showing you how it works, together with the expansion and the content that adds. Then we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think. Okay, folks, I'm going to give you a brief overview of Fleet Commander. This is a competitive game for two players. The goal of the game is to take out a certain amount of classes of your opponent's ships, which sounds very weird, but let me explain. Every ship has a different class number associated with it. Think of them as levels. And for instance, in the base scenario, you need to take out 8 classes worth of ships. So the biggest ships have 4 class ranks, and then the smallest ones have 1, and so on. So it's riskier to take out the bigger ships, but it gets you more ranks towards winning the scenario. Let's talk about those ships a little bit, and just focus in a little bit on how you can actually tell what the ship's classes are. So you have battleships, destroyers, and frigates. The battleship is the one big ship that each side has. This is what it is for this faction. For the other player's faction, it looks like this. And then the destroyers are a little bit smaller than that, but bigger than the smallest ones, which are the frigates, which are these things here. So there's 4 frigates, the small ones, 1 destroyer, and 1 battleship, and 1 destroyer. And they all just kind of look like the same type of ship, but just on a different scale. So that's what all the other faction ships look like. And in fact, you will deploy them in these, notice that there are squares. This is a 5x5 square board. You will deploy them in this deployment zone of the board. Now, if you focus in a little bit, each of the bases of these miniatures have what looks like a little click space, if you're familiar with hero clicks and such. You actually have to assemble these. It's not too tough. There's a dial that you put here, which will have the amount of, essentially, hit points that each ship can take before it is destroyed. So the destroyers have 12, the frigates, the smaller ones, have 6, and the battleship has 24. The other things to note here are the class, which is the blue number, and the attack power, which is the red number. And then the little icons over to the side are actually special ability icons. If you play with the advanced rules, which we'll get back to later, those are indicate the special abilities that type of ship has. Other things that you need to do in the setup, each player is going to have a chance to put out these special fields onto the board, or not. It's totally your option. So in other words, players are going to go, I'll put a field down, you put a field down, or you skip doing it. You have asteroid fields, which if you go into one of the asteroid fields, you're probably going to take damage. You have to roll randomly to see if a special symbol comes up on the die, then you're going to take damage for all the ships that move into it. However, while you're in there, you're pretty much immune to many of the effects and combat damage that your opponent can sling against you. Then you have the gravity fields, and the gravity fields are actually going to, if you move into them, they're going to scoot you out into a random space by rolling a die. So if I move my squad from here to here, it's going to scoot me into another space, or randomly it might decide that I can't get in at all, and it's going to deal damage to my ships. Now, speaking of those dice and other things, each player is going to have a command bridge, which is this little tile here. You're going to have 3 dice of each of the 3 colors, and on your command bridge, you're going to stick a special weapons token. Now, you'll get one of these out of 6 of the different weapon tiles that are in the game. There's also a variant where you can choose them secretly and keep them secret from your opponent until you actually use it. Now, this is actually a tractor beam, which basically says that when you use a special ability, which you have to do by getting 2 different colored special symbols from 2 different colors of dice, you activate the special weapon, and in the tractor beam's case, you can actually move a ship, move it wherever you want, including potentially into an asteroid field. Whereas my opponent's over here has the gravity missiles, which are actually going to potentially target an enemy ship anywhere on the board for 4 damage. Excuse me, those are called vortex missiles, my bad. Another variant of the game makes use of these decoy and hidden movement tokens. Essentially, you know how I have all the ships laid out there right now in my deployment zone? Instead, I would use tokens in place of those ships. They would be hidden from my opponent, and you wouldn't be able to tell which class of the ship is in that particular space. And in fact, some of the tokens are decoys and won't be anything at all, but your opponent won't know that right away. Oh, before I forget, one thing I should have noted is that the special weapon that you have is usable by your Class 4 rank ship, which is your battleship. Just something to note. Alright, so let me run you through the sequence of play real quick. The first thing you're going to do for players are going to take turns going back and forth, whoever is drawn randomly to start. And then when it's your turn, the first thing you do is any kind of lingering effect. So this would be from any kind of special weapons, or if you're in a special type of scenario, or if you're in an asteroid field, that's something that you need to take care of. Then you would go to the allocation of energy. Now, these dice that you have here are your energy dice, and we're going to explain a little bit more in depth about what they do in a minute. But what you'll do is you'll pick 3 of the dice that you have not committed to your command bridge yet, which we'll get back to in a second, and you're going to roll them. Then that goes right into the next phase where you actually get to allocate these dice and use them for various different types of actions during your turn. The last phase that you have on your turn is to actually allocate dice that you haven't used onto your command bridge for future use. You can put 2 dice into your reserve in order just to use them at a later date, like on the next round, or if they're shield dice, which are the green ones, you can put them into your command bridge just to protect from your opponent's incoming attacks, or you can set dice aside in order to use the special action dice in order to use your weapon with your battleship. And I'm sorry, I did make a mistake before. You can use 2 special dice of any color to activate your special weapon. They don't have to be of different colors or of the same color. So, what can you actually do with the actions with the dice? Well, first you have movement. The different types of movement dice are the yellow dice, and depending on which face you have on the die, they're going to allow you to do different types of movement. So let's focus in a little bit here. So, for instance, if I wanted to use this dice that has like the 5 pips, I would be able to move all or part of my ships in a space to an adjacent space. Specifically, a diagonally adjacent space. So for this part of my fleet, I'd have to go into either an asteroid field or a grav well, which I might not want to do. So maybe I'll use it for this part of my fleet, and I can move both ships that are here or just one of them into this space. Now, if I had used the die that has a plus sign symbol on it, instead I would be able to go to an orthogonally adjacent space. So in that case, I would use that for this part of my fleet, and I can move them to here. And if I had the one that looks like it has 9 pips, I could go in any space direction that I want to. Now, the red dice are going to be used for attacks, and here's where we'll have a little more of an elaborate demonstration. So, for instance, let's say that we were already pretty close to combat parameters here. Oh, and by the way, you can only have the number of ships you can have in a space is determined by rank. You can't have more than 5 class. You can't have more than 5 class worth of ships in the same space. So let's say that this was a situation here now, and I want to use my attack dice. These function very, very similarly to the movement dice. So for instance, if I had this, I would use, which looks like the 5 pip, then I could be able to attack diagonally. If it was this one, it would be orthogonally, just like it shows on the die. Or again, if I had the 6, what looks like everything, the 9 pips, then I could go in any direction that I want to. Now, there is a difference here between just regular attacks and ranged attacks. I know it's in space, so everything is ranged, but a ranged attack means you can actually potentially attack multiple spaces away, but how you do that is by chaining your dice together. So, for instance, if for whatever reason I really wanted to attack a ship that was all the way back here, then I could do that, but I'd have to combine a diagonal die with then or an orthogonal one, or I would have to do the one that lets me go in any direction and then an orthogonal one. However I want to do it, I have to chain the dice together. There is also such a thing as combined attack, so if there were other ships of my fleet that were on an adjacent space to my target, they would automatically attack as well without having to spend dice. Now, assuming that the attack is not blocked by shields, which we'll get to in a second, then the damage that is inflicted is equal to the damage that is on the base of each of the ships, and you combine all that together, especially in the case of a combined attack, and that is how much damage gets taken out of the hull of the enemy ship, and you'll actually move the dial around. If it ever gets down to 0, that ship is destroyed. And then finally, there were the shield dice. Now, these are pretty self-explanatory because, again, they're going to function just like the other dice, where it's either going to be you're blocking an attack that is diagonal, blocking an attack that is orthogonal, or blocking an attack that is coming from any direction. You essentially block all damage coming from a particular ship in one of those directions. Or, I'm sorry, to be more precise, you're blocking all attacks from a square. The last couple of things I'll explain are the advanced rules, which you won't necessarily play with in your first game, and that's the fact that every ship is going to have a different type of power if they're with each other. So, for instance, if I had nothing but frigates in the same space, those frigates can use a movement die and it would count twice because they're faster and sleeker than the other ships. On the opposite side of that, if I had nothing but destroyers in a space, they get to use an attack die twice for the purposes of ranged attacks. And then, of course, the battleships, the main class 4 rank ships, get the special abilities of their weapon by using the special action dice. The other thing is that the special symbols on the dice, which are like the little starbursts and things like that, also have special abilities of their own in the advanced rules. So in addition to activating weapons, you can also use a special symbol to change the direction of another die of the same color. So I could use this yellow special to make this into an orthogonal if I really want to. Each one of the different types of colors can also have a special ability. So a yellow special symbol is a dodge, where you can actually take your ships and move them to an adjacent square that is open in order to avoid an attack. The red one is a counter-strike, where the damage isn't going to be avoided from an attack, but the ships that are in the attack square can carry out an attack of their own. And then the green special symbol is going to be a drain, which is going to let you take one of the dice that are on your opponent's command bridge and actually remove it from the command bridge. That's draining their energy. And there's other things I didn't cover, like different scenarios, different board setups, different types of win conditions, things like that. But I think you got the gist of it. That's the basic game. So let's go ahead and take a look at the expansion stuff real quick. Alright folks, this is everything that comes in the Beyond the Gate expansion for Fleet Commander. The first thing you'll notice is you have 2 new types of ships, or it's 1 new type of ship and you have 2 miniatures for it. These are called cruisers. And cruisers are a Class 3 ranked ship. They have 18 hit points, and the way that you integrate these into your base fleet is that you have to decide which, you only have to have a certain amount of classes in your fleet. So if you want to add the cruisers into your fleet, you have to remove a number of classes equal to however many cruisers you're trying to put in. So if you're trying to put 1 cruiser into your fleet, you have to remove 3 classes worth of ships from it. The advanced rule special ability for your cruisers is that when they spend a shield die in a space that has a cruiser, they can actually take the damage for any other square that's been attacked around them. You have a new field to use in the game, a radar anomaly and a gas cloud on the other side. So the gas cloud here, basically, if you're in a gas cloud, and you're attacked, you can immediately grab a shield die and roll it and apply its result if you can. It also essentially blocks line of sight. People can't attack through it. You can never use special attacks into it. You can launch an attack from the gas cloud, but you can't support any attack that happens outside of the gas cloud that someone else initiated. Then on the other side of that, you have the radar anomaly. Whenever you go into a radar anomaly the first time, whoever is controlling that vessel, it has to roll a die and see what happens there. If it comes up as the orthogonal symbol, it's an asteroid field. Basically, this is just saying that this field is scrambled and you have no idea what's there. So it could be an asteroid field, it could be a gravitic field, a gravity field, I just call it. If you roll the field die, which is the 9 pips on it, then you choose what it is, either a gas cloud, including gas cloud, or empty. And if it's the special symbol that you roll on the die, it's just an empty space. Then you have new special weapons that you can choose at the start of the game. One of them is the interdictor, or the interditer. I never know how to pronounce that word. Basically, whoever uses this just puts a token in an empty square up to 2 spaces away, and it's this one here. It actually just becomes a block space. No one else can go through it or use it for any kind of practical purposes. You have the vortex jump, which is going to let you move an entire square's worth of your fleet and basically teleport them to another space on the board. And the exo bomb, you can launch it up to 2 squares away from your battleship, and wherever it lands, it's going to deal a point of damage to every vessel in that space and every space around it. Now, the rest of the stuff that comes in the box is actually going to enable you to play sort of epic battles with multiple players, more than 2 players, over several boards. These are jump gates. Jump gates can actually connect different boards together. This requires you to have multiple copies of the base game in order to use them. And the gates will link. Now, if you want to have different types of links, you can use the side that actually has the letters on them, X, Y, and Z, and so forth. And then you have all these different markers. Oh, by the way, these are actually more tokens for your new cruisers if you do the hidden deployment option. But all these markers here in different colors, yellow, green, blue, and red, are going to be used to differentiate different fleets, because even with multiple copies of the games, there's only 2 different types of fleets per box, so the fleets are going to look the same. You'll use these tokens to tell them apart by putting them on the base. And that's all the stuff that comes in the Beyond the Gate expansion. Let's get to my final thoughts on all of it. Now, you have to do a little bit of assembly for this game, as far as like putting the ships on the bases and on little stands. It's kind of like how it had to do with tail feathers. But when I was doing it, I was like, this is kind of neat, because I like science fiction space battles and taking big armadas and fighting them against each other and capital ships and all that kind of stuff. So I was putting them together. I was actually going like pew pew pew. It was just a really cool thing, and that little bit of the theme was really coming out of it. Then when you actually set up the game and have it all out there and have your ships there, you're like, all right, I'm ready for an intergalactic space battle. What you end up with is, which is to say that as cool as the idea of the theme is, of having all these ships move about and fight each other, this game felt very, very bland, especially thematically. I wasn't sure what we were doing. I think there's a blurb in the book about what the fleets represent or what the backstory is, but it never comes out through any of the gameplay. There's no character cards. There's no illustrative artwork. The board looks very, very bland. The ships themselves are very nondescript. I mean, they're clearly different from each other, but they're not pre-painted. They're not any. There's like a tiny little symbol for each different faction, which again, I don't know what these factions are or what they represent or why we're fighting each other. And it's just very sterilized from the theme to how it comes into play out on the board. I was just like, I don't even know what we're doing or why we're fighting. And this theme could have been anything. We could be ships at sea. And I would have gotten the same exact feeling. We could be avoiding whirlpools instead of asteroid fields and things like that. So that's a knock against the game. As far as the actual gameplay goes, a lot of it is very interesting. I like the idea of allocating dice. It's always something that I have liked, and it's interesting here and how it's utilized with the movement and attacking. It's all the same thing. It's all using a die to do either orthogonal, diagonal, or anywhere you like. And that's a very interesting way to do it. I don't know if it's superior to just, I get this many points of movement, and I move here, and then I just roll dice to see if I attack. But it was a more interesting way to go about it, and it feels less random. It's still random, obviously. You're rolling dice, but being able to stow away dice on your command bridge and then use them later, that's a neat idea, and I like that. What I really dislike, though, is the fact that both of your fleets are the same. I mean, they look different, but they are essentially the same. And yes, I know there are special weapons that you can use, which is supposed to be like an advanced rule, but the advanced rules in this game are very easy to integrate, and I highly recommend using them. Even the hidden deployment one because it's not that big of a stretch to add it to the game, and you need as much flavor as you possibly can in this game. I can't stress that enough because it's severely lacking in that department. But the whole thing about the feats being the same just bugs me because, again, it's not thematic at all. Like, what does my fleet represent? Like, who are we? Shouldn't we have like some cool alien powers or something in order to fight the other fleet? Shouldn't there be something unique about our piloting style and what we choose to do other than just, oh, this is the weapon I chose this round. I get missiles and you get a tractor beam instead, and only for one of our ships. And yes, all the ships have different powers, but my ship's powers are the same as your ship's powers. So, and we're not talking about a lot of ships here. It would have been 6 different special abilities if they wanted to do that. The expansion switches things up a little bit. You get another ship. Okay, great, the cruiser. But even that's not that dramatically different. It's just got its own special ability, which is just, hey, I get to do shields for someone else's square around me. Okay, that's not terribly exciting. And even the one new tile, there's only one copy of that tile that is either, you can't even, that's another thing. It would have been great to have 2 tiles so you can have both a radar field or a radar distortion field and the gas cloud in the same scenario, but you can't do that because there's only one of them. The whole thing with the jump gates is only if you want to do a big sprawling multiplayer game, but that's the thing, is that you can add as many players as you want to the game. It's still the same game. It still feels pretty dull. So overall, I'd have to say I was pretty disappointed in this. I mean, there's definitely a solid game here. It is interesting, the whole dice allocation, how your ships move about. The combat is just like, hey, it's how much damage you deal is not random, which is pretty gratifying because it's like, hey, if you can successfully outmaneuver your opponent, you're going to deal damage, you're going to destroy ships, and that is a gratifying feeling. But it just feels so, just work through it. Just, go step by step. There's nothing exciting. There's no ups and downs. There's no heavy jump out of your seat and yell and scream yeah, I just destroyed you. The kind of things you would expect from a game that isn't a Ameritrash game. I'm not even sure this qualifies as that. I guess they were trying to mix Euro-style elements into it, and I think that killed a lot of the enjoyment you might get from miniature skirmish game in a traditional Ameritrash style. So it looks mostly good, except for that bland board. It looks like there's a substantive game there, but it is just super duper dry. That's what I walked away from with my experience of Fleet Commander and its expansion, which didn't really add that much to the mix. Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.